Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Remain Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Pastor Tom Hooks.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about seasons of life. Enjoy. Pastor Tom, thank you so much for coming on today.
Man, I appreciate you having me. I was looking forward to this.
I'm very excited. It's really cool to have you on. I'm just going to tell you straight off the bat, I really look up to you. I've known you for for quite a while, but if you guys
That's going to cost me, I have a feeling.
If you guys are not familiar with Pastor Tom here, he is our youth pastor here at our church. Many of you are familiar with him, but if you're not, that's who he is. You've been here for how many years now?
I actually started coming to the church. When I was thinking, because of some of these things that are going on, January of '94 was when I first started coming to the church.
Wow.
My first service actually was like in December of '93 was my very first service.
Uh-huh.
And I started thinking, that's a long time.
It
more
is.
than half my life.
It is. So I want to get into that.
Yeah.
But I do want to say that just in just knowing you, Jordan and I were talking about this other day, man. It's just so apparent, like knowing you as a pastor, but also knowing you as a person, that you really care about people. And it's so apparent when we talk to you. It's always it's like oozing out of you. Pastor Gary always talks about, you're like a sponge, whatever's in you when you get squeezed or touched, that's what's going to come out. And it's always been the number one thing to me. I've been on the mission field with you a few times, and
Yeah.
it's just always, it never changes. It's always, you're always there for people. Your heart for people is always right, and I've always looked up to that.
Oh,
So
man.
I just wanted you to know that.
Appreciate that so much. Actually, speaking about mission trips, I was thinking when you asked me, I thought about our trip to Trinidad and Tobago was the time that I actually got to know you some, other than just in a church setting. That's a great thing about mission trips. You get to know people outside of that setting.
Right.
And I thought, man, this is a pretty cool dude, man.
I was the long-haired, hippie-looking kid. Man.
Yeah, remember that? Oh my gosh!
I don't know if you remember the part where I got sick. But
I kind of remember a little bit of that.
Oh my goodness, that was.
I was leaving that out.
That was the worst. The food poison. I guess that's what it was. I don't know, but that was pretty miserable. But
yeah, that was rough.
Yeah. So talking about your time in the church, though. So you started in '90.
I did a little bit of work. Pastor asked me about starting a youth group, and somewhere towards the end of '94, just hey, we don't have anything. Would you be interested? Seeing if there's any interest and. I did that for a little less than a year, and then I went to Rhema for a couple years. When I finished my time at Rhema, I came back. I thought somebody would be doing it. I figured, well, I'm probably going to have to get a job somewhere else. But was in my heart, I was like, man, I'd love to go back. And I called Pastor just on the way back and said, hey, I'm going to be in for a little bit. I don't know, I don't know if there's any openings, but, I'm very interested if there is something. And he said, well, we'll talk when you get back. So we talked a little bit and nobody was doing youth ministry. So I just kind of jumped back in there, and that was in '97. Got back in August and kind of started in September of '97. And man, we had this amazing large youth group. I mean, on a great Sunday, we might have 2 students. Sometimes there was 1. I mean, we had a great Sunday. There was 4, and we thought the greatest thing in the world. And then we go back down to 2, and I'm like, oh man, I stink at this. And then we had 10 one time, and I thought, oh my gosh, you're on cloud 9. And then the next week there's 3, and you just have this roller coaster, but you just stay at it. You mentioned some things, and I really appreciate those words you shared. You just try to stay consistent with people. And that's the one thing of it. If I could say anything, is when you're consistent, people know what they're going to get from you. They don't have to guess. And we were just consistent. We stayed the course through we could write a book about the things that have happened at the church through the years.
Especially dealing with youth.
Well, oh my gosh. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a funny story. Our first youth trip, and I won't say any names, but Pastor was with us, and then there's a couple adults, and we had, I don't know, there's like 4. We went to an Acquire the Fire. Those old, it used to be very popular little conferences. We were at Virginia Beach in January, and we were on the beachfront. We stayed at a Holiday Inn, and you walk from the parking lot, and there's a little walkway that took you to the office to check in. Well, between the walkway and the parking lot and the office check-in was the pool, the outside pool. So we're walking to go get our rooms and get the keys and stuff. And all of a sudden I hear this splash, and I thought, who in the world? And lo and behold, it's one of our students that jumped in the pool.
In January.
30 degrees.
Nice.
That water was probably 30 degrees right there on the beachfront.
Nice.
And then we went to the first night, of course, and then somebody calls me and says, hey, you better go to this room. They're throwing chairs off the balcony, trying to throw them into the pool. And I thought, this is my first trip. It's probably going to be my last trip. Pastor's going to fire me after this.
And he was there too, right?
He was there too. And I thought, oh my gosh, it was a riot, but craziness. Stories.
Well, I remember a story. I'll tell you a quick one. I was with you. We did hiking. This was years and years ago, but Samuel Pierce was with me. I remember.
All right.
But we did the hike to the Cascades.
Yeah.
I think we're trying to go and see them frozen with you, like with the youth group, because in the wintertime they freeze. So we go, we hike. I mean, it's a good little hike out there, and you're out there a good ways, a few miles, I guess.
Yeah.
And we get there, and this one kid, I don't remember who it was. If I did, I wouldn't say his name, but the water was kind of frozen out. Do you remember this?
I think I do, if it's what I think.
Yeah, it's like frozen out under the waterfalls, and he walks out on the ice, and he says, look, I'm like Jesus, because he's walking on water. And as soon as he says it, the ice gives, and he goes neck deep, and it's freezing outside, and he had to walk all the way back. He's soaking wet jeans and 30-degree weather.
The funny thing is, just prior to that, I said I wouldn't do that, because if you were to fall in, we got, it's a 2.5-hour hike back.
Yeah.
I said, you're going to be freezing. No, turn my back. And next thing I know, I hear splash.
Maybe it was a life lesson for him.
I hope so.
Well, what I really enjoy about this podcast is when I have people on and we talk, I always want to talk about things that they want to talk about. Yeah. And I know we had discussed some things, and you brought to me that you want to talk about the seasons of life and transitioning in seasons of life.
Absolutely.
And what was the reason you wanted to bring that topic up? What is?
Well, of course, if you don't know, we're getting ready to make a move ourselves. The Lord started talking to us about stepping down and stepping into something that He has for us. The crazy thing about it, it's like a perfect setup. I said, Lord, everything is great. And, when I went to pastor, I was like, the weird thing is this, I couldn't ask for a better situation for my family to be in. But when I think it was 2 days before I talked with Pastor, the Lord took me in my devotions, just in my devotional reading was Genesis 12. And He talked to Abram, and He says, I want you to leave your family, your friends, everything you know, and I'm going to take you to a place that you'll know, that I know, that I'm going to lead you to this. And I said, well, man, Lord, that's a big move right now, and we already had some season of life changes. Our oldest just went to California to go to Bible school, just out of the blue. Like he just come, like in September, said, hey, I want to go out to this preview. So all of a sudden, as a parent, we've got this big season of life change for us because he's moving the other end of the country. And, trying to, this is something that he wanted and that God was working and orchestrating and gosh, and literally in about a month span, he was accepted, got approved, had all his paperwork done. I mean, everything just fell in place like pieces of a puzzle. It was amazing. So, we had that on top of, now we've got this decision. And I said, well, Lord, we're going to have to uproot our kids. This is like a big thing. And, and we did think about the kids some, like, it wasn't just like, okay, we're leaving, now we're gone. And,
right.
We thought about, well, we need, at this point, this was January, at this point, we got to let the kids finish the school year. We can't just uproot them in the middle of the school year. They're already leaving everything they're knowing because of their dad's call and their mom's call. So we were trying to be very, aware of, their emotional needs at this time too, because this is a big change for them.
Oh, yeah.
One is very excited. One is got a lot more relational connections, so it's a little different. So, we're working with this person. This one, I don't want to say who it is, because, but we're trying to guide them through this time too, because that's a very emotional time. And, I had about a 2-month window. I was crying all the time.
Really?
because you got all these connections, like
Right.
we just talked about earlier, 30 some years of families, youth, just everything in the community. You just feel like you're a part of a community now. And okay, Lord, I'm going to start from scratch. Like this is literally like going from knowing a group of people to knowing nobody potentially. Actually, and I'll tell you what's neat is the way the Lord works. A lot of times when He's preparing you for stuff. I came across this podcast. I listened to this one guy, Kerry Nywoff, I think is his name, and he has a leadership podcast. And he interviewed this guy that was getting ready to transition, was in a very successful pastor, and he wrote a book called Next. How do you figure out if it's your time? And I ordered the book because I was very interested because, it was on our heart. It was on our radar at that time. And so I bought the book, read it, and I thought, this is a carbon copy of us right now. Mm-hmm. The way he felt, the way he expressed, on the paper, there's no reason I should be leaving.
Right.
This is the perfect scenario for where we're at. But, there's something about, I got thinking back how many years I've prayed, okay, Lord, wherever you want me to go, I'll go. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do. He just called me on it this time. And I said, well, Lord, I've prayed this for years. I guess it's time for us we've got to do this. Mm-hmm. And in the natural, there's all kind of things. At first, I was terrified, but, I knew his voice. And when you know his voice, you can do things, even though naturally you're terrified. You can step out and do things because you trust him. And even in spite of the fear, sometimes as parents, we're afraid of what's going to happen. Okay, our kid's they're going to graduate from high school. Maybe they're going to go to school somewhere. What's going to happen? All the what ifs. But what if they encountered God there? What if they needed to get out and experience some things, and the things that we laid groundwork for will now become that solid foundation which they begin to build their life on? Because ultimately, as a parent, you're a steward. We're just given the potential and the time to steward them, hopefully in a direction that's towards God,
right,
and towards his call for their life. But they're choices that they have to make at some point, mm-hmm. not because we want them, but because they're making them.
Right.
And so we've really grown in a lot of this because you got to release, and that's a hard thing to do because we've got all this time, investment, energy, basketball practices and games and through, a bad relationship and the struggles they might, trying to work them through without making decisions for them, but helping them through, guide them. And, all those relational matters. Gosh, the world's a different place now than when I grew up. What was a struggle for me is not even close to what some of the people are experiencing today. Right. COVID changed a lot for a lot of people. All of a sudden, in the midst of all of our hyper-connectedness through our social media accounts and stuff, all of a sudden, we were in a room. Okay, I'm super connected, but I'm still in a room by myself or with just, your immediate family. And so that rocked a lot of people's worlds. Mm-hmm. But that's where this relationship with Jesus has to come in. And sometimes we got to do things with struggling with that fear, because fear is going to come to all of us. Kobe Bryant, I saw an article, I came across something. This is really interesting. Somebody asked him about, do you ever have self-doubt? And he said, that's an interesting question. He said, it's not that I don't, it's just I don't have time for it. And he explained it. He said, the truth is, no matter how great of an athlete you are, you're going to have a great game, but you're also going to have bad games. That's just part of life. So why would I get in self-doubt over that one game? And he said, so many people they're rocked by that one moment, and they lose sight of all the others along the way on the journey. Mm-hmm. And I just thought, that's such a great, great insight. Because so many times we let that one moment overshadow all the moments that God was doing. Yeah. And, Moses, I was meditating on this the other day. Moses, it talks of him. He was one of the greatest prophets in the scriptures, and the things that God did through Moses were incredible. I mean, I've gone to many lakes and everything, and I've raised my hands, no water stood up on its side, and dry
You're
ground.
that weird guy. I saw
Yeah,
that. Now.
yeah, that's. Maybe they made a movie, but no. But he got to a point in a moment of frustration. When God asked him to do something, instead of speaking to the rock, he struck the rock, and God was upset with him. It wasn't so much. I think he was upset because this frustration led him to do something he wasn't trusting him, and he stopped looking to him, and he was looking to himself and his own frustration. And when we get into seasons of life, and maybe you need to get a new job, or some of the people who might be watching might be transitioning from high school going into college,
Right.
or college going into the workforce. We got to be careful who we tell things to as well. Maybe you sense there's a season of life change. Maybe I'm supposed to, step down from this job and get another job. You don't always tell everybody. I was just reading this morning in Numbers 32, and these people were coming, and Moses was talking to him. He said, why are you trying to discourage the children of Israel from going into the promised land? God promised them. In other words, God spoke a word to them. He gave them a word that they're going to go into this promised land and it's going to be theirs. But some of them began to discourage the hearts of the people about it. Wow, can we do this? Mm-hmm. But it's interesting. He says, I don't know why you're doing this, but Caleb and Joshua, they wholly followed me. And I just was thinking this morning, we got to be careful who we let know the things that are going on in our life, because some people will discourage you from doing what God said because they're afraid. And some people will encourage you and be a great support. We just got to be careful who we're telling about these.
That's good.
Because I just thought, man, we don't need people discouraged. It's hard enough as it is. But God, He knows. And so I believe that God puts the right people across our paths. And, when we have these times, you got to have those ride or die kind of people that got your back. Mm-hmm. And when you got that, you can entrust your heart to some of these people. But we go with what God says. Mm-hmm. We got to go and we step out on what God says. And a lot of people might not understand that all the time. And they might not always be happy about it. That's one of the things I've learned. I was talking to a pastor friend of mine, and he just made the transition. His took over for his dad, and been a couple years now. And I said, well, has anything shocked you now that you've been in it for a little bit? And he says, I've been amazed at how quickly somebody could turn on you, and then 3 weeks later, they're your best friend again, mm-hmm. and they're back in like nothing ever happened. And I thought, boy, there's some truth in that.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. With like you mentioned, like this is somewhat targeted towards young adults, but a lot of people watch this podcast. But you've went through a lot of these seasons of transitioning in your life. You went from high school to college, and then you found a spouse, and then you had kids, and now you're dealing through all of this. Can you speak on, because you've walked it all out with the Lord, can you speak on how you've grown, or what type of advice you would give people who are trying to walk it out with the Lord, trying to make these seasons?
Oh, that's a great question right there. I think the biggest thing is keeping the main thing. And I know it sounds so simple. Pastor said something in his message, I think it's about 3 weeks ago. He said, can you win the next moment? And I love that, because let's face the facts. God's going to talk to us. And our next thought's probably going to be, I don't know if I can do that. Because usually it's more than what we think we're capable of. Usually, right. Not always, but, that's why he says, hey, go call so-and-so and ask them for forgiveness for what happened in this situation. I don't know if I'm ready to do that. We had a situation happen. Long story short, we bought a house, and we had some complications. Just a long story short, and I was so upset about this, and I was just angry. And the Lord came to me, just doing my devotions. I was just winning the moment. Doing my devotions. And He said, I want you to pray for this person. I want you to pray for him they're going to be blessed. They're forgiven. Everything they touch is just prospers in their hands. And I said, I'm not doing it. I'll just be real. And he came to me again and he says, hey, I need you to pray for this person. He says the same thing. And I said, I don't know if you didn't hear me. I said, I'm not doing that. He ripped it. I was thinking, I felt ripped off.
Right.
And he came a third time and he said, hey, I want you to, and for me, when he comes like that, like this has happened several times in my life. When he comes like a third time, that's when okay. And I said, Lord, I'm going to do this for you, and I did it kind of gritted teeth and grudgingly. So I started praying for him, and immediately he changed my heart. And I genuinely began to want that to happen in his life. And long story short, the other scenario regarding our house, it all worked itself out. I didn't know how at the time, but I really believe we would have had a greater struggle had I not gotten my heart right. And because of that, we were able to transition to the house that we're in now. But it all started with his sharing something with me. Mm-hmm. You can't so sometimes you get these, if it was easy to do sometimes, then everybody would be doing it.
Right. And
unfortunately, today, not everybody's willing to follow him. So you said, speak to this age bracket. Moving from high school to college for me was, I took a year off. Mm-hmm. And then I thought, okay, there's a little school that was about an hour from me, and I signed up after that year. I went for a semester. The Lord started talking to me about going into ministry. So I made a big step. I, stepped out, and I remember telling my mom the first time, I said, hey, I think God's calling me to go to Bible school. And she was the most encouraging person in the world at this time. And she said, why do you want to do that? And I was like, it's not what I expect. I said, well, I feel like this is what I'm called to do. She said, well, they don't make any money. I said, well, Mom, I'm interested in what I'm called to do. Mm-hmm. I'm not really in it for the money. It's more about following his leading. And I think it'll take care of itself, especially if you find what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Right. Is always what I've heard.
Right.
And so sometimes you're going to step out. And that's why I shared earlier. You might be surprised what some people around you might share. And God's going to talk to you because this is a personal relationship with him. Mm-hmm. Maintaining that personal relationship with him is vital. As we walk through some of these, keeping him first and foremost, I think is the key. I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for him. Mm-hmm. Now I've made decisions along the way. I had to say yes. I had to let my pride go at times. It wasn't always easy. A lot of missteps, but he was patient because that's who he is. He's patient. He's loving. He's kind. And he guides, directs us, and helps us. And trusting in him requires everything on our end. Stepping out on what he says, and willing to go places. So when I started having some of this, I started having some conversations with different people. And I said, if God ever talked to you about going somewhere, do you think you would? And I was surprised at how many people said, I'd have to really think about it. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. I was really shocked by that because I'm not talking to people in, Food Line.
Right.
I'm talking to people in the church world.
Right.
And it was kind of shocking because I thought, I said, Lord, I really meant, I think when I prayed these prayers, and I think a lot of times we do, but then in the heat of the moment comes, are we willing to step out and do what he asks us to do? Mm-hmm. And as a young person, we just talked to the students something pretty interesting on Sunday. I just came across a little snippet, and the Lord started talking to me about relationships. And he says, the statement was very simple when the guy shared at a young adult meeting, actually. And they were talking about relationships. And he said, you've got to marry the fruit because that's what you get to live with for the rest of your life. Mm. And I thought, man, that was such a powerful word because, sometimes we're thinking about, let's face the facts. You're a student. Relational matter, those things matter right now. That's very important. And, but sometimes, if all we look at is the external, the natural, the way they look, how big or strong they are, or we miss some of the red flags of who they really are.
For sure.
But if the fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, does that person love you above themselves? Or do they always think of themselves?
Yeah, that's good.
And does that person have joy, or they have peace, that even when chaos is going on, they're able to weather that? I don't want someone that's creating more drama in the boat. I want someone we can carry some peace together.
Right.
Because we're going to have to make it through this. I don't need to fight 2 battles.
Right.
And so that was that meant a lot to me, of course, in our situation as well. But, sometimes you just look for the fruit. What's in a person? Sometimes we want this friend or we want this person as a friend, for example, because they're so funny. They make me laugh, but they're always telling a joke at somebody's expense. Mm-hmm. Do you really, if they're telling a joke about somebody else, they're probably going to tell one about you in the long run.
Right.
So that fruit's important. I think that's a valuable thing to be looking for.
That's a good word. With these decisions that we make through life in these these transitions of seasons, a lot of times, you have lukewarm Christians that they ramp up their prayer life when it's time to make these decisions, right? Because they want to hear from God. And maybe they're not as familiar with God and his nature because they haven't spent the time. And it's no knock on anyone. I'm just stating facts. Yeah. But if you're speaking to those people and you had to kind of guide them in the sense of knowing that it's God telling them something, what would you say to that? For people that are questioning, how do I know it's God that's telling me to make these decisions?
Man, that's an amazing question, because I think so many people live there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
How do you know it's God speaking to you?
Right.
I just heard Jensen Franklin said something that was amazing. He said, if you're struggling to hear God, you can still read about him.
That's good.
And sometimes we might struggle. Is this God, or is this just me? Am I making this up? Did I have too much ice cream right before I went to bed? I had pizza, and am I supposed to make this next move, or should I talk to this person or not? I think my biggest thing is get to the Word. Mm-hmm. Let God's Word. In the volume of the book, it says it's written about Him. Mm-hmm. And if we want to hear God and get familiar with His voice, we spend time in the Word. All of a sudden, His voice gets a little more easy to understand. I've noticed this in my life. It's when I first gave my heart to Him and started following Him, I needed a lot of big things. I needed a lot of people to confirm things and pat me on the back, and I needed words of encouragement. I don't need that now. One time Elijah was running for his life, and we know the story. He's called up, and God calls him out on the top of the mountain. He's in the cave, and He calls him out, and there's the earthquake and the thunderings, the lightnings and the storm, but God wasn't in any of those. He was a still small voice. And I think we need to get to the place where we don't need the big things. We hone in on a still small voice. And then look for peace. There's a peace. And if you've ever put your shoe on the wrong foot, it's very uncomfortable. It doesn't feel right. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people just because they get afraid and they get in a hurry, they put the wrong shoe on the wrong foot, and then they try to live life. Mm-hmm. It's very uncomfortable. And if we'll slow down, sometimes I think we're in such a hurry in our society today. If we would slow down and say, okay, God, I'm going to give you space, and not be in such a hurry. You know what? You're 33 now. Just because you're not married and have 2.5 kids, it's okay. Mm-hmm. It's not the end of the world. Right. Actually, maybe God is preparing you for a specific thing, and He needs a specific person. He's got somebody specific in mind that's going to help propel you into your calling. But if you rush it, you might miss out on what you need to get to your next level. Mm-hmm. And slowing down, giving Him space, I think just the every day, can you win the next moment? I'm going to win the next moment, Lord. I'm going to spend it with you. Nothing happens. You don't hear anything. It's okay. Mm-hmm. Next day, I'm going to win that moment. I'm going to spend time with you. I'm going to give you space. And then little by little, you just kind of know if you can get peace down in here, that's a good thing right there.
Yeah. There's one of my favorite scriptures is in Philippians, and he talks about the peace that he gives you that surpasses your understanding. And it's, to me, it's like you really can't explain it because it does surpass your understanding. And it's kind of for me personally, some of the seasonal transitions I went through in my life. Recently, I've done one for work, right?
Yeah.
And I have to say, it was not easy. I had a lot of big obstacles, a lot of challenges I'm still working through, and I was a little bit of a wreck kind of when I'm very familiar with Scripture. I'm very, I spend time with God. I could definitely do more, right? We all could.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
At the same time, God kind of shows up, I think, a lot of times when you don't expect it. For example, I started this thing with my work, and I was having a rough season, and we had Bible school. Mm-hmm. Right. And I'm like, man, I kind of hope the next subject's on like something like this, right? Like, like even though you've heard it 100 times, you know what I mean? But it's like, oh, it would just be great. And then it's like, oh, we're going to talk about healing. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right, good. And you actually taught on healing. And I will say, I got more out of those 4 classes regarding my situation. And we were talking about healing. It wasn't even, God was just like talking to me through stuff. I think I talked to you a little bit about it, but I'm like, only God can do that.
That's right.
Like, and if you just have to dig in, the Scripture says that His children know His voice.
Yes.
And I can't stress enough, over the past probably 15 years of my life, like, I grew up in church and everything, but the last 15 years, really, I've just like spent more time in the Word, and I can't tell people enough. Like, you got to get in the Word. You got to get to know God. Because if you don't know His nature, you don't know what He wants for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important. And
what are some keys you've learned? Okay, in the last 15 years, for example, what are some things that you've seen?
Well, you mentioned the fruits of the Spirit, right? And it's important to realize that once you become born again, that you have the Spirit of God, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the gifts of the Spirit, that is God's Spirit. Like He is those things, right? So when you look at scenarios and you look for answers for things, sometimes if you look at those gifts, right, you might see that in the answers, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, with this, for example, last year with my job, I had an awesome opportunity on the table. And so it looked like on paper, right? There was one little thing, though, that I just was not cool with. And I was like, the schedule's great, it was a promotion, everything. And I was kind of getting pushed towards it. And I went ahead and I was like, all right, I'm going to apply for it. It'll give me time to think about it, right? So I'm in the Word and everything. And I just never could get peace about it. And every door was opening as I did it. My interviews went great, Ended up, they offered me the job.
Okay.
I'm like, oh my goodness, like now I really don't know. So I'm spending time in the Word. I'm praying, but that peace was just not there. I accepted the job, and I was in turmoil. So I had to go through like a 3-week transition of I had to do all the legal stuff and all that stuff. And my boss could probably still kill me because I still have the same boss. It was the Monday I was supposed to start. That Sunday night, I have never in my life just been so in distress about this, like ever. Like I'm a relatively reserved person. I was like, my wife was like, I've never seen you like this. So I didn't sleep at all that night. And I was like, this is not the right move. So I ended up having to call my boss that morning, Monday morning. And I was like, look, I've made a horrible mistake. Like, I understand if you don't even want to keep me anymore. I get it. And of course, they were awestruck, like, wow, like you're coming to tell me now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And everything looks so great. And so I go back and thank the Lord. My boss is awesome. And she let me keep my current job, the job that I had at the time.
Okay.
And I just kept on working. And it was about close to a year later, this other door opens. And it was far superior to that. But if I would have just gave in because everything looked, in the natural, all these things, like you said, but you got to follow peace. So for me, the greatest piece of advice that I've ever had, other than getting in the Word, knowing God's nature, is following peace.
Yeah.
For sure, 100%.
Absolutely. Well, Psalms 86:5, I think, I might be wrong, but I think it says something along the lines, and I'll paraphrase, but that God will lead us by this peace. Mm-hmm. That inward knowing that God gives to every person. I don't care even if you're not walking with Him. There were times I remember before I started walking with Him, before I gave my heart to Him and turned my life over to Him, I would go to do something and I just knew this is not it. Mm-hmm. that's a bad decision. And then you're faced with that dilemma. Do I still do it?
Right.
Do I step back from it? And it's like I played a lot of basketball, and there are times, man, you get ready to take a shot, and you can just tell as you're in mid-motion, oh, this is going in. You just have that. You played soccer. There were times when I'm sure you're getting ready to take a shot. It's like, oh, I don't stand a chance in the world. I don't know why I'm still doing this. And there's other times like, oh, it doesn't matter who that goalie is. This is going in. You just know. And I think that's the way it is sometimes because, if God gave us peace to be, the Holy Spirit he's our guide. And I was thinking one day I was taking the kids and all of a sudden and I always share 2 or 3 scriptures with them. Like I take them to school every morning. So I always share a couple scriptures. God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. For the law of the Spirit of life in Christ Jesus is setting you free from the law of sin and death. So now they're quoting him, which is great. But one day I was telling him, I said, that the Holy Spirit, he can teach you all things. And all of a sudden it was just like my mind was blown. He can teach me how to fix a door that won't shut right. Mm-hmm. He can teach me how to have a better relationship with the person sitting across from me at a lunch table or somebody that you ran into and had an issue with at Lowe's. And I thought, Lord, I've undervalued the person of the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. You can teach me all things. You can teach me how to make better decisions. You can teach me how to be better at my finances. I thought I'm saying this for the kids. I was sitting there, wow, I got to write this down. I don't want to forget this now.
Right.
And leaning on him, do we lean on him enough? I don't know that we do. Mm-hmm. And even for the best of us. And I'm very grateful that he works with it. He knows what he's working with but still chooses to work with us and help us and guide us, direct us. And it's crazy. Cause like in your situation, what if you wouldn't have listened to that?
Right. I probably wouldn't be working there anymore.
Yes,
I'd be gone. I don't know if I could have dealt with that.
Oh man.
Yeah. But just when you're talking about spending time with the Word and knowing God, I can't stress it enough to know like the nature of God. We were talking about Bible school recently. We were talking about Abraham when he takes Isaac up. God calls him out and says, "Hey, I want you to take your son up for an offering to me." And he has a 3-day journey, and he gets 3-day journey till he says, "You just go until I tell you." And then he says, "This is where I want you to do it." And so he's going to take him up and kill his son. And what got me was he brings 2 gentlemen with him, right? 2 of his servants. And he says, "You guys keep the donkeys here. We'll be back." And that verse right there stuck out to me. I'm like, he knows he's coming back with Isaac. Like, so then, he goes up and he goes to do the thing. And of course, God says, don't hurt him. And, if you look back in the previous chapter, I think it's in like Genesis 21, maybe don't quote me on that, but, it's when God promises him his son and he'll have great descendants, right? Well, he knows his son is going to have children to make that happen, right? So he was listening to God then, right? He remembers that promise. He remembers that promise. And in those 3 days' time, he was familiar with God's nature. He knew God wasn't going to give up, he wasn't going to fault him. He wasn't going to fail him. And that was stuck out to me big time. Like when he said to those guys, "We're coming back, like you guys stay here." But
could you imagine that journey? What was going through his mind still though?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, for sure.
Gosh, am I doing this for real?
Right.
Like, on it, Lord, are you sure?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But you have to know God's nature. And as you go through these seasons of life, if you just know him personally, but you have to spend the time. You have to spend the time in prayer and the Word, just getting to know him. And I will say sometimes, I don't want to say that they get easy, but they definitely get easier. Yeah. For sure.
I would agree with that. Yeah. And I think we can trust him even with the hardest decisions. Like, I'm willing to do this. If you have to, you can raise him from the dead. Right. Because I know who you are.
Right.
But I'm willing to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Well, if you had to narrow it down to one piece of advice that you would give people in seasonal transitions in life, whether it be going to school, getting married, having kids, whatever it may be, if you had to give one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think what we've been talking about, you got to get to know the nature of your Father. Because when you know his nature, then you can trust him with what he's asking you. Mm-hmm. Because he's never going to ask us to do anything that would harm us. that would destroy us. He's only going to ask us for things that's going to benefit us in the long run. It might be some things, you might have to eat some crow. Like, hey, I messed that up.
Yeah.
I screwed this up. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to people and say, hey, I treated this situation wrong. I was wrong. Please forgive me. I wasn't a good example, and I needed to do better. And I'm working on doing better from this point moving forward. You just got to, knowing his nature is, because then you can trust someone that doesn't change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You can trust someone that you know the response almost before they give it, because that's who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And, going back to we talked a little bit about the fruit of the Spirit. Man, if he's Proverbs said, what's desired in a man, you would think it would be strength or wisdom or these things, but Proverbs says that what's desired in a man is kindness. But that's a quality of our Father. Mm. And he's going to talk to us about things, but he's never going to just destroy us, but because he's kind. And he's going to work with us because he's kind and he's patient. And he wants the absolute best for us. So he's going to do everything that he can to get us to that desired result. And then you can rest. I don't know if we know how to rest enough in him. There's, sleeping 8 hours or 10 hours or something, but then there's a rest that comes from being in his presence. I don't know if we know enough about that rest yet. That place of just, Christine and I've, it's so ironic because we, obviously there's a lot of things we got to do right now, but this is an extreme amount of rest that I'm walking in right now, in spite of, I've got things to do on the house. We got things to, I just redid my resume. That's the first time I've touched it in 27 years, I think it was. When I talked to a pastor, I was like, I'm not even really sure what we're supposed to do. I'm like, I haven't stepped down from a job in 26 years. Uh-huh. Like, I don't even know what that's like. But we're at such a place of peace and rest, and it's really awesome.
Yeah, that is. And
we still got a large chunk of things in front of us, but we're resting in that. Mm-hmm. We're resting in what he told us. And when you can get to that place, it's amazing how easy the other things become, because they can't move you now, mm-hmm. because you're resting in him. He's not moved. Right. He's not worried about it. When your world is full of anxiety, the great thing to know is his world is not.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're living in his world. If we're connected to him, then we live from his world. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty amazing thing to think about, because then we're not bound to the ways of this world any longer.
Right.
And it releases us. And finding that place of rest is awesome.
That's a good word. I did have one more question I want to ask you, just from a father to a father, right? Because
okay.
I got little ones, and we have a lot of young dads that are part of the ministry. I kind of want to get a piece of advice from somebody who's had kids growing up, and you have different ages.
Yeah.
Because my kids are little. If you had to give me a piece of advice, or just any advice, regarding watching your kids grow up, going through seasonal changes, because I've learned so far as a dad, you love those little rascals more than anything, right? So
you'll do anything.
But I know that, you're going to watch them go through things, and sometimes you're going to feel helpless at times. But can you speak to that, like to the dads out there, to the moms out there?
As crazy as it sounds, don't be afraid of letting them fail. Some of the best lessons I ever learned is when I failed. And nobody saved me. Nobody came to my rescue. I mean, the Lord does ultimately, right. But that was the best thing that happened for me, actually, because I learned some things I don't think you can learn any other way. Mm-hmm. It's not that you just go out, okay, they're going to run their head into the brick wall and, no, what are you doing, son? But letting them make some decisions and failing, and then going back and spending some time. What do you think happened there? Mm-hmm. Why do you think this happened? Could you have done anything different? Trying to teach them about life is, okay, this is how I've kind of learned to hear God's voice, son. What did you hear in that moment? Did you hear anything before you were getting ready to do that thing right there? Or why do you think this happened? Do you think did that honor God or did that dishonor? Taking that approach of, it's okay to fail. Failure is not final. It just showed you a way that it's not going to work. And I think so many people are afraid of letting our kids fail that I don't want to say that. The only way I know how to say it is kids aren't tough anymore. And I don't mean like, but they don't have the ability a lot. This generation seems to lack an ability to handle, like, everybody gets bullied. Well, man, I'm not trying to be mean. We've probably all been bullied to some facet.
Right.
At some point, when are we tough enough to handle some of these smaller things? If we can't handle it on a smaller scale, what's going to happen when you get out in the workforce and somebody's trying to step over, just have I think failure teaches us how to be a little tougher. And I survived it, and I can still move on. I think that's a great lesson. It's just helping them to learn how to fail correctly, I guess, would be a good way of saying it.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Oh, man, thank you.
Well, is there anything you want to add to anything before we close? The mic is yours. The floor is yours.
I want to take this home. I think the biggest thing is keeping ourselves in a posture to hear from God. If God were to come to you right now, would you be able to receive something? Would you be able to hear it? Or is your life so busy that we can't even hear his voice now? Keeping that posture of, God, if you want to say something, I'm available today. I think in our hyper busy world that we live in today, and we all fight it. I do. Everybody I talk to does. But is our posture in a position to hear from him? If we can maintain that, I think that would go a long ways to helping us navigate this life. I think far too many people are so busy, unless he used a bullhorn, they probably would never hear anything. Yeah. Because there's so much activity in their life. And keeping that posture, God, if you want to say something to me today, I'm available. And if you want me to do something today, I'm here to do it. And because we don't live for ourselves. We're living for something so much greater. Right. And that person you might work with, and that person you might be sitting across the table with at lunch in the schoolroom, or one of your classmates, they might be going through something life-threatening. And you might be the very person that can help them because you're in a posture, you're in a position to hear from him. And just maintaining that posture, and it's work. You have to maintain it. You have to fight for it. Yeah. So. Awesome. Well, Pastor Tom, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for coming on the podcast. Oh, man. Delighted. Awesome. I'm honored. I'm looking. I think you're teaching our next Bible class. Yeah. Yeah. Looking forward to it. Can't wait. What do you know? What's the topic? Oh, obviously you know the topic, but yeah, fellowship with God, prayer. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for checking out the podcast today. If you have not come to a Remain service yet for our young adults, they are the first Friday of every month at 7:00 here at Faith Fellowship in the Venture Building, which is right beside our main campus. Faith Fellowship, our main services are on Sunday morning at 9 and 11. We would love to have you. Pastor Tom, we're praying for you as you go through. I know God's going to use you for awesome things. It's just been a privilege to sit under you for so long. Oh, man. Learned a lot from you. It's been awesome. So, wow, I'm really proud of you guys. You guys have really, the great thing about being in my position is I get to see fruit like this and people that have stepped into their place and finding what that is in God and then walking in it. And it's the most rewarding thing one of the most rewarding things that you experience in doing ministry. Is seeing others stepping into those things. So thank you for honoring God and doing that. And awesome. Thank you guys for checking it out today. See you later. All right.